It's interesting how we remember things, how we remember people, and what we remember. Now, quite a few years after Lutosławski left us, I'm left with many very strong memories of him, and obviously of his music. The music is living, the man is not. So maybe it's time to remember him as a man, and think how the man connects with the music, how our knowledge of the man helps us to understand the characteristics of the music. I was very privileged to know Lutosławski for many years, about 15 years, towards the end of his life. We met many times, very regularly, in Warsaw, in Żoliborz, at his home. During the time of martial law in the early 1980s, I lived very close, just round the corner, and we used to meet very regularly. Back in England, we met very often when he was conducting our great orchestras in England, which he did many times each year. So we met many times in many different places, and I have many memories of him, especially as a conductor. When I remember him as a conductor, I recall certain things, like the way he used to arrive on the platform, the way he used to walk onto the platform. He was always immaculately groomed, immaculately dressed, and he had a very neat way of moving, quickly, very light. And then he would arrive on the podium without fuss, straight into the work. And then his gestures were very precise, very clean, very clear for the orchestra. They liked it. They liked the cleanness, they liked the fact that it wasn't full of pretensions, it wasn't full of affectations. It didn't have a romanticism of gestures. It was precise. But that doesn't mean that it was completely dry. There were moments in the music, in those dramatic moments, where the music explodes, and the gestures would also explode. Because his gestures were very restrained and small with the orchestra, it's the best tradition of conducting. So when he made a big gesture, the orchestra, it became a different situation altogether. The orchestra exploded with a large gesture. They responded very carefully to him. I also remember his manner with orchestral musicians in the breaks between rehearsals. There were many cases that I observed him working closely, maybe with the second trombone, or the third percussionist, or the second oboe, in the breaks between rehearsals. And these players would come up to him, and they would regard him as a great mentor for the music, not just as a conductor. And they would ask him details about their own parts, and he would always give a lot of time to them and very carefully explain whatever their concerns were. They loved working with him, and they had tremendous respect. Orchestras are very difficult animals. They play games. They like to trick people. They like to trip up conductors, especially young conductors. It's very dangerous to be a young conductor with any orchestra. They like to catch you out. I know this from my own experience. And observing Lutosławski working with them, they had tremendous respect for him, because they knew that he had very, very good ears. They knew that he did have good ears. They knew that he could spot any errors or unfortunate things, even in the most dense textures. So they respected the fact that he could write those things, knowing exactly how they should sound. Not many composers do. There are many examples of composers writing complex music, and when they get in front of an orchestra, the orchestra immediately senses that they don't know what they're doing. With Lutosławski, it was not like that. They sensed immediately that he did know, that he could hear, and that he was in control of what he was writing. So it was always a pleasure for me, not just as a composer, but also as a conductor, to observe him in those situations. His manner on the stage, at the end of the performance, was always immaculate. He always observed forms, he always observed courtesies, and that showed in the ritual courtesies of a concert.